Hey, I'm Virginia Holman with the Island Wildlife Chapter. We're a chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation serving the Lower Cape Fear region. And today we're very happy to have Elizabeth Pinnix with us. Elizabeth is the Stewardship and Education Specialist for the North Carolina Coastal Reserve and National Estuarine Research Reserve, and she is based in Wilmington, North Carolina. She obtained her Bachelor of Science in Oceanography from UNC Wilmington in 2015 and her MS in Marine Biology from Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale in 2017. During her time in Fort Lauderdale, she worked with the U.S. Geological Survey conducting benthic surveys for seagrass abundance in the Florida Keys and the Port of Miami. And she worked for Broward County conducting sea turtle nesting surveys. She began working for the reserve in 2017 and works on various land management and species monitoring projects at 4 sites in southeastern North Carolina, including Masonboro Island, Zeke's Island, Baldhead Woods, and Bird Island. She has her 6-pack captain's license and loves to be on the water as much as possible, both for work and for fun. And she's here today to talk about Diamondback Terrapins and the Terrapin Tally. So welcome, yes. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Virginia. Yes, I'm here today to talk about our favorite little marsh turtle. I am going to share my screen with you all. Okay, is everyone seeing the slides? Are we good, Virginia?
Yes, you're great.
Okay, perfect. All right, so like Virginia said, my name is Elizabeth Pinnix, and I'm the Stewardship and Education Specialist for the North Carolina Coastal Reserve and National Estuarine Research Reserve. It's quite a mouthful. So I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about Diamondback Terrapins in our region, as well as the upcoming Terrapin Tally project that we'll have in the spring. So just to give a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about today, just the background of the Coastal Reserve, what we do, who we are, and then we'll go into Diamondback Terrapin background, some of the threats that terrapins face, the active protections and initiatives that are going on right now in our state to protect these little guys. We'll talk about how you can help and then have some time for questions at the end. So like I mentioned, I work with the Coastal Reserve and National Estuarine Research Reserve. This is a map of all the National Estuarine Research Reserve sites. So it's a network of 29 coastal sites that are designated to protect and study estuarine systems. At all of these 29 sites, there's consistent monitoring, and it's being conducted in order to compare trends over time across the entire country. So there's sampling that's being done in all the estuaries in these sites so that we can look at the changes. For the purpose of this talk, we're going to focus on the North Carolina Reserve, and specifically Masonboro Island Reserve, where a lot of the pilot activities have started with Diamondback Terrapin research. So zooming in to our coastline, this is a map of the 10 North Carolina Coastal Reserve sites. So these 10 sites are managed under the Division of Coastal Management. And you'll see on the map that the green sites are the state managed sites, and the blue sites, the blue dots, are the National Estuarine Research Reserve program sites that I mentioned. So up at Currituck Banks Reserve on the Virginia border, Rachel Carson Reserve in Beaufort, Masonboro Island Reserve in Wilmington, and then Zeke's Island Reserve down near Fort Fisher. These are all part of that national program that I mentioned, and so they all have baseline data of weather and water quality data that's being taken all the time to contribute to that national database. So today we're going to focus mainly on the southeastern portion of the coast, from Cape Lookout down to the South Carolina border. So what we're all here for, what do we know about the Diamondback Terrapin, other than they're the cutest marsh turtle ever created? So Diamondback Terrapins are the only turtle that's found exclusively in the marsh and estuarine system in the United States. As you can see in some of these pictures, there's quite a bit of variation in their coloration and the patterns between individuals. So even turtles that are found in the same area can be drastically different. So all 4 of these turtles could be found at the same island and look this different. So it's really cool. They're very individual. As you'll see, their head and limbs are covered in this spotted skin. And then on their shell or their carapace is decorated with these concentric rings. And that's one way you can tell, the difference between a Diamondback Terrapin or a slider or a box turtle you might see in your backyard. They're very, very distinct when you see them. Diamondback Terrapins are also sexually dimorphic, which means that based on their gender, they're bigger or smaller. So in this picture on the top, these are actually 2 full-grown terrapins. The one on the top is a male, so the males don't get as big, and the one on the bottom is a female. So it's just really interesting to see. Typically the larger ones that you'll see in the marsh are going to be the females. So the range of Diamondback Terrapins, they can actually range our entire coastline from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, all the way down to the Gulf in Texas. There are within these areas 7 subspecies. We have an overlapping of 2 of these subspecies in North Carolina. The cutoff line's about Cape Hatteras. So we actually have the northern subspecies and the Carolina subspecies. You won't be able to tell the different subspecies just based on looking at them, but this is something that you would have to identify with sampling. So the habitat range is a narrow linear habitat. So like I said earlier, they're only found in the estuary, which is brackish water. So that's where fresh and salt water mix. So they really only have this really skinny habitat along the coastlines where they can exist. So you'll see how that's going to play a role in some of the issues that they run into later on. But so this is their range, so they can be found throughout our whole coastline. So like I mentioned, they live in the estuary. They frequent waters surrounding marsh grasses. Their favorite food is the periwinkle snail, which can be found on a lot of cordgrass and spartina grasses in the marsh. They also will eat crustaceans that they find on the mud flats. During low tide, like this girl is in the picture, they also are known to bury in the mud of the shallow creek systems that'll empty out completely during low tide. So they are reptiles and they need heat and sunlight to stay warm. So to avoid drying out and to stay warm, they'll actually bury in the mud depending on the season or the time. So the low tide, they'll bury in the mud to keep themselves cool. And then during the winter months, they actually hibernate. So they've learned to crawl down in the deeper creeks of the marsh system, and they'll hibernate there over winter to avoid freezing with the cold water and cold air temperatures. So this time of year is actually when they're coming out of hibernation. So hopefully in time for the Terrapin Tally in a few weeks, they'll be out and about. We've had a few cool nights, but hopefully the water temperature is getting up there, so they'll be out and about after hibernation. So nesting. Diamondback terrapins mate during the spring. So coming up very soon, we should have some nesting terrapins. Afterward, the eggs are laid from late April through July. And these clutch sizes can vary, which is just the amount of eggs in the egg chamber, anywhere from 4 to 18 eggs. In the bottom left picture is a picture of some Diamondback Terrapin eggs that were found on Mason Burrow. If anyone has some experience with sea turtle monitoring, they are very similar in feel to a sea turtle egg, but they're much smaller and they're actually oblong. And they have this really pretty pink color to them. So they will bury their eggs in the sand, just like a sea turtle would. The egg chamber ranges from 6 to 8 inches below the surface. And like this girl at the top, she came out of the marsh. So they'll come out of the marsh at high tide, typically during the day, come onto the beach, and they typically lay their nest on the backside of the dune system. They like the soft sand and some vegetative cover. So they'll come up and they lay their eggs. So they'll dig an egg chamber, they'll lay their eggs and then cover it right back up and crawl back to the marsh. So you'll see in the top left picture, it's kind of hard to see, but this is what we look for when we're monitoring for nesting for terrapins, is there's an incoming track up here. And then this disturbed area is the where she laid her eggs, where the egg chamber is, and she covered it back up and then left her nest. These eggs down at the bottom were actually found from an abandoned nest. Sarah Finn actually found it while she was monitoring for sea turtles, and we were able to rebury those eggs, and they actually ended up hatching at the end of the season, which was really, really remarkable. But they do come out during the day, so it is not uncommon to see them basking in the sun, walking around the beach. It might be kind of odd at first to see, but it's not uncommon, and they are fine. Sometimes they go all the way over to the ocean and then go back to the marsh. The picture in the middle is actually one that was right at the edge of the water on the ocean side. So they do roam around a lot. But another cool thing that is very similar to sea turtles is that the temperature controls the sex of the hatching species. So the warmer temperatures when they're incubating will produce female terrapins, whereas the cooler temperatures will produce male terrapins. And these incubation times last anywhere from 61 to 104 days. It just depends on the temperature. So hatchlings, these cute little guys, when they emerge, they're only about the size of a quarter. You can see in the pictures, it's kind of remarkable that something that small survives. But that's a real pencil, a normal sized pencil, and that's how big that terrapin is. So when they do hatch, they move as quickly as possible to find cover and protection. So they will not go straight into the water. They try to avoid open water just because of their size. So they'll stay on the edge of the marsh and hide in the rack line and find cover. What's really interesting about terrapins is that some nests, depending on the temperature and how late in the season these nests are laid, if the hatchlings hatch in the nest and they think it's too cold, they will actually overwinter in the nest and wait until the next spring to emerge. So if you do happen to find hatchlings in the early spring or during the spring, that's probably what happened, is that they hatched, it was too late in the year, they overwintered in their nest, and then they all emerged later. So this nest is actually the one that we found and then we marked off because it was right in the middle of a walkway. So that nest successfully hatched, and that is one of the hatchlings. Diamondback terrapins are very important to our marsh system. They're considered a keystone species, which means that if they are present in a system and they're thriving, that most likely it's a good sign for the health of the habitat. So they play a critical role in the management of periwinkle snail populations. It's about 80% of their diet. And by eating all these periwinkle snails, they actually prevent overgrazing of the marsh grasses by keeping those populations regulated. They're also important in the natural predator-prey balance of the marsh. And just overall, they're a really wonderful species to have in your marsh. It's usually a sign of a happy, healthy marsh, and they're really, really exciting to see when you're out paddling. So unfortunately, Diamondback terrapins do have some natural and man-made threats. While nesting, the mothers can encounter predators while they're trying to find suitable habitat, but also the nests themselves can be predated. There's predators like raccoon, possum, foxes, sometimes avian predation. All of these are factors in some of the threats of predation. Also, habitat loss is a big one that I think terrapins face on a daily basis. So coastal development and hardening of our coastlines, seawalls, jetties, these all decrease the amount of accessible habitat for terrapins. And one that is pretty inevitable, sea level rise right now. Like we talked about, there's a really thin area that these terrapins exist in. And so with the rise of sea level, it's flooding out some of their nesting habitat, some of their foraging areas underwater. So it can just be pretty detrimental to the success of a terrapin. Some additional threats are bycatch in commercial and recreational fishing, as well as human interactions. It's not uncommon to see them in the summer months in the creek systems. So boat strikes as well as car strikes. Not as much in our area down here in Wilmington, but some of the northern counties and the Outer Banks have marsh systems next to roads that terrapins will cross in order to find suitable nesting habitat. So there can be some human interaction in that sense, as well as just marine debris. Same as sea turtles, entanglement with fishing line, and especially ghost pots. They can become stuck inside a crab pot and then they're unable to get out to breathe. Something historically that's not specifically a problem right now, but the pet trade and harvesting of Diamondback terrapins. Back in the 1920s, terrapins were a hot commodity. They were sought after as a gourmet item, and you could get a dozen of them for $90. The market was really booming to eat turtles. So if any of you are familiar with the Beaufort, Morehead City area, the Duke Marine Lab on Pivers Island was actually originally built to raise Diamondback terrapins. So clearly that is not happening anymore, but the populations in North Carolina were really damaged with the wild populations, but they've really been making a comeback, and we hope that all of our work is helping to bring back some solid wild populations in our state. So now that we know the threats of Diamondback terrapins, what is being done to protect them? So through the state of North Carolina, they are listed as a species of concern. And within the Wildlife Resources Commission Management Plan, they are listed as a species of greatest conservation need. So what this means is that more data and research is needed in order to make some more educated decisions about conservation plans regarding Diamondback terrapins. But the good thing about these listings is that they prohibit the harvest and possession of terrapins in the state unless you obtain a permit for educational or scientific purposes. So you'll see like this picture of this terrapin in the marsh. She actually has a tag on her with an antenna. So she was part of a research project with UNCW. So that's why you can have them for a specific amount of time in order to study them, or some educational programs have them captive. But yeah, it is illegal to harvest or possess them. Another thing that has been happening since 2003 in the state have been ghost pot cleanups. So this has been a wonderful, wonderful project to clean up our estuaries, clean up our marshes. And it's been a great partnership with the Division of Marine Fisheries, with the Marine Patrol, as well as the North Carolina Coastal Federation. They've just done remarkable things to remove marine debris from our estuaries, and it helps more than just the Diamondback Terrapins. So that's been something that's been going on, and it's really been an awesome project. So now what can you do to help? So we've learned about everything that's going on, but you want to actually hands-on help with something. So something you can do is participate in marine debris cleanups. So whether it's organized or you just go out on the beach one day and clean up, they both are awesome. Anything you can do to help clean up our marshes is a win. You also can install a BRD on your crab pot if you happen to personally fish with a crab pot. A BRD is a bycatch reduction device. And basically what that is in these two pictures, it's a plastic piece that is installed to the funnel of the crab pot. And it basically allows your catch to go in. So it will allow crabs to go in, but not allow Diamondback Terrapins. So you'll see they've done a lot of studies and a lot of research on the exact size that works. And so these are now available. I'm trying to get the information from Marine Fisheries to see if they're available to the public, but if I do get that information, I can pass it along. Another thing you can do is report abandoned or derelict crab pots. So it is not legal to remove someone's crab pot, but you can report them. The Division of Marine Fisheries is in charge of that operation and has authority over those. So you can report them if you find a crab pot, like in the top picture. It doesn't have a float, it doesn't have a line attached, it's broken, it's stuck in the marsh. All of these kind of trigger, oh, this is a ghost pot, and you can report that. Its location and sometimes pictures are helpful. Another thing you can do is while you're in the marsh, especially back in our creek systems during the summer, if you're in a power boat, to just use slower speeds. They do kind of pop up all over the place. So just to have awareness of your surroundings and use those slower speeds back in those creeks. And then lastly, something you can do is participate in the Terrapin Tally. So moving on to that, the Terrapin Tally project originally started in 2014. It started with a conversation between Wildlife Resources Commission staff and the North Carolina Coastal Reserve. They realized that there was really a lack of Diamondback Terrapin data in our region, and there also was no dedicated resources to figuring out any information about them. So they thought, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this work and figure out what's in our area? And they created a citizen science program. So that's the Terrapin Tally, and the pilot project was created at Masonboro Island Reserve. So that's in Wilmington, for those of you that don't know, but it is down here in the picture. And then Wrightsville Beach is to your right side. So basically how this was working was they trained community volunteers to go out and paddle these predefined routes during a specific time frame. And basically we had people paddling on all these routes, and it would give us an understanding of how many Diamondback Terrapins were in this area. So they set out to do it. They trained the volunteers and they started collecting data. But what this really looks like was, like I said, two teams of two paddling, and you just kind of paddle through the creek systems at or around high tide while observing and recording Diamondback Terrapin sightings. So what you're looking for is this little tiny head popping up in the creek. It takes some work and some practice, but once you know what you're looking for, it's a breeze. But this project, it really did open the door to just how much we don't know about these turtles. It's also initiated multiple master's projects, undergrad student projects, as well as some physiological studies with a group of specific terrapins from Masonboro Island. And we found that there's still a lot to learn. And Masonboro Island was just a small piece of this puzzle. So in the past few years, we started thinking, well, what else can we do? Like, how can we figure out how many terrapins are actually in the state or beyond? So we thought bigger and we expanded. So now the Terrapin Tally is available at 11 different sites that range from Bird Island down at the South Carolina border, all the way up to Cape Lookout National Seashore in Carteret County. So the original site was right here, Masonboro. And now we have all of these sites available and a total of 41 total routes. We hope to expand this project for 2022. These are our sites, but in next years, we hope to expand further north in the state, hopefully Ocracoke, some other sites, and we've even floated the ideas to some bordering states. So it would be really awesome to just have Terrapin Tally routes all over the place, and it's just a really great way for people to get out on the water and contribute to a long-term database. So we've been really successful over the years, and I don't want to give too much away because the Terrapin Tally training is next week, but you can see some of the numbers over the years. So we have 2014 to 2021, and just know that 2020 we did not have a Terrapin Tally due to COVID. So that's the only year we had to take off. But over the years, we've seen a variability in the sightings, and we've learned a lot about the factors that go into sighting them on the water, and we've had to make alterations as we go. But some of the variations that we've found are the wind is a big factor. Our protocol, we've decided that there's a level at which you can see terrapins with the wind speed. So it's really difficult to see their little heads pop up if you have really choppy water. So wind influences as well as water temperature is a big one. If we have a very cold spring, they may not come out till later. So that's impacted our numbers, as well as trainings and practice paddles. It's really important for us to have our participants comfortable and understanding of all the equipment when they're out there. So all they have to do is focus on looking for terrapins. But just a little note on this 2021 portion. So this was the year that we had our expansion this past year. So we had 11 total sites, and we recorded 284 Diamondback Terrapin sightings, which is awesome. Just, it's so exciting. So we hope to have more this year. But I did want to end on a really high note. One of the biggest outcomes from this project has been the creation of Diamondback Terrapin management areas. So save the best for last. A recent amendment to the Blue Crab Fishery Management Plan allowed the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries to designate areas of high terrapin abundance as Diamondback Terrapin Management Areas, or DTMAs. So basically what that means is that any commercial fishing crab pot in either one of these two management zones are required to have a bycatch reduction device. So like I mentioned earlier, those BRDs, the plastic things that go into the funnel of the crab pot, those have to be installed on their pots. So it aims at reducing the amount of Diamondback Terrapin bycatch. Just to get you aware of where this is, the green highlighted area is Bald Head Island natural area, as well as Zeke's Island Reserve up here near Fort Fisher. And then the red highlighted area is the entire boundary within Masonboro Island Reserve. So what is awesome about the Terrapin Tally is the data that we've collected since 2014 has actually gone to inform one of the first two Diamondback Terrapin management areas at Masonboro Island Reserve. So with the help from the public and our partners, all these annual surveys that we've been doing with the goals to expand, the Terrapin Tally and research in the area on terrapins really has the ability to create real change in the success of Diamondback terrapins. And we are just so excited to see how this moves forward. And we encourage everyone to go out on the water, see if you can find terrapins, participate in the Terrapin Tally, because they're just such a cool marsh turtle. And I think everyone deserves to see one. They're just the greatest. But with that, I'll say thank you. And just my name is Elizabeth Pinnix with the Coastal Reserve. I've added my email on here if anyone wants to ask me questions or contact me, or you just have a really cute picture of a Diamondback terrapin. I'd be happy to talk to you. Our website is down at the bottom corner, as well as I've included a QR code that you can scan directly on your computer screen right now, and it'll take you directly to the Terrapin Tally website. So if you're interested in learning more or registering, just scan that and it'll take you to the website. The one thing I will say is if you do want to participate, you do have to register. It's required to get the Zoom link to come to training. So please go to the website to learn more. Or if you have questions, let me know. I also can put the website in the chat box so people can have it that way as well. But thank you so much. And I really appreciate you guys listening to my talk about terrapins.
This is great, Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Let's see, I'm trying to get the screens going here. We have a couple questions popping up. Jerry Reynolds, you may have answered this one, is asking, have we required BRDs on crab pots? And then on another screen, he's saying, yay for Diamondback management areas required BRDs. Is there any possibility, this is my question, not Jerry's, of extending that management area down a bit?
So I'm not in the conversations with if they're expanding it right now. These were the two pilot areas just to see how it went, how is it going to be enforced, that whole thing. So I'm not sure about the expansion of them, but I don't think anything's impossible, especially with all the added data that we're collecting.
Okay, great. Jody is saying that we have Diamondback terrapins nesting on the beaches and that people find the hatchlings and want to pick them up and move them closer to the water. They think that they're protecting them from, excuse me, predators to do so. What should she say to them to stop this behavior?
It's a great question. I typically educate more than tell people what to do when I'm on site. So educating them that they're a wild animal and they naturally can do these things on their own is always a direction I take. And really touching them is not good for them or for you. So just educating them that maybe they can do it themselves and you appreciate them trying to help, but they can do it themselves.
Okay, very good. Jody,
You can watch them too. Like you can watch them and make sure nothing comes and hurts them and let them do it themselves. I know with sea turtles specifically, if you pick them up and take them to the water, they don't get the energy they need to swim. So you actually need to let them move so that they know how to swim when they get in the water. So I'm not actually sure with Diamondback Terrapins because they don't directly go straight to the water and swim offshore, but that's another thing.
Very interesting. Jody also followed up with, how long do Diamondback Terrapin hatchlings or hatchings? Hatchlings stay in the marshes before they head into the water?
So there's not a lot known about these little guys. They will go into the water, but they avoid these big open areas. So if you see kind of like little creek systems that veer off to the sides, you can see smaller ones there. I have seen some small ones in little creeks, but they kind of avoid. So like the picture I had on the last slide, they'll avoid those big open creeks just to avoid predators. So they move into the water quickly because they have to eat.
So it sounds like they move between areas of high salinity and lower salinity, or is there any sort of upper and lower salinity levels that they prefer?
Don't actually know the salinity levels, but they are awesome creatures and can handle really wide ranging salinities. Okay. So they can be in almost freshwater and almost complete saltwater. Okay. And it completely varies. Some of the turtles, it just depends on where they are, and they'll actually regulate themselves to be okay with whatever the salinity is.
Okay. Very good. Joanne is asking, what temperature produces males, i.e. below what temperature?
I knew someone would ask that, and I cannot remember. I wonder if Seraphin's on this call. She probably knows. I don't remember. There she goes, 28 to 29 Celsius.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you, Sarah.
Great. I don't know. Does anyone else have any questions? Someone's asking if the recording will be available later for review. Yes, absolutely.
Someone said you can get crab traps with turtle excluders at vendors like Bass Pro Shop. I have not seen that. That's cool.
Oh, that's great. You must be getting different questions than I am. Peter Vankovich, who's on the call and who wrote a wonderful article on Diamondback Terrapins and Phragmites this year, is asking if Phragmites is present in the Tally areas.
Yes. So specifically at Masonboro, we have 2 patches that we're working on treating on the island proper itself. But on most of our dredge spoil islands, they have a lot of frag. And so I know it's prevalent throughout our coastline, and it's a real issue. We've been trying to find some ways to mitigate it. It grows so fast. And so we're trying to find the best way to approach it. Trying to avoid chemical, just because it does go into those systems where the terrapins are, where other animals are. But no, it's definitely something on our radar for sure, especially with the coastal reserve.
Yeah, I mean, the things I've read about regarding Phragmites involve things like large sheets of black plastic and trying to bake out the rhizomes, which doesn't sound ideal for
we were actually probably going to do that on Masonboro to try and test multiple like theories. And so we were going to try that and cutting. So there's been a lot of different ways.
Goats are very popular solution. People.
I don't know if we want to introduce that to a nature preserve, but
not permanently.
Oh, and someone asked, are they found along the Cape Fear? Yes, terrapins are all in the Cape Fear River. A lot of the dredge material islands in the middle of the river, they love to nest on them. They actually they're really good shorebird nesting habitat, and you'll have that and you'll have terrapins. So you can definitely find them in the river.
trying to see, are there any other questions? We seem to be kind of getting a bifurcated chats here, Elizabeth. So you're getting things that I'm not seeing in the chat on my screen for whatever reason.
Someone asked if I'm familiar with the Diamondback Terrapin project in New Jersey. I am not. I know there's a lot of projects that have done something similar to what we're doing, the head count surveys. I've also seen some people do kind of hatching areas. I've seen people do terrapin beaches up north, where they actually curate areas where terrapins can come to nest and they protect them from predators. But I'm not specific. I don't know about that specific project. So yeah, that's all of the questions I think I'm seeing come in.
How many volunteers are you currently getting, and do you intend to just have the Terrapin Tally over a couple of weekends each year, or is this a project you're thinking may somehow be able to expand into other areas as far as community involvement and engagement?
So for having this consistent data set, we plan to continue doing it within the same time frame. And expanding that, and that being the Terrapin Tally, so during the spring. But at Masonboro and a few of our other sites, we've had some seasonal technicians and interns that have been able to continue tallies throughout the summer. So we've actually been able to see when we're seeing some peak abundance of them, when they stop showing up. I really think it would be interesting to see during the span of the summer how many are out and about. It just would be difficult to have that consistent database. So it could be additional information that we receive with people just doing tallies and submitting their sighting data. But it would be hard to compare with the different times that people go and where they are. Because we have a pretty strict protocol with weather guidelines and time, and so, but it can't hurt. We have a lot of our interns and staff, whenever they're out, submit record or sighting data of terrapins, and it's definitely something that the Wildlife Resource Commission wants. The more sighting data we have, the better. Right. So, and
it would be interesting. I mean, this is just me as a humanist, not as a scientist, thinking along the lines of, it would be so interesting to see this data run alongside of, say, climate change data and sea level rise data. And I'd be very curious to know what you may have seen or anecdotally observed in terms of just climate shifts, what you anticipate might be problematic for the Diamondback terrapins.
Yes, that would be, I mean, and just with our barrier islands, I mean, they're moving and they get smaller and they get bigger and they change, and a lot of the habitat that was there is not there, and now there's new habitat and less vegetation. So just all the changes we're seeing are, yeah, it's going to be very interesting going forward for the terrapin.
And do Diamondback terrapins, do they require a lot of aquatic vegetation of any kind?
So primarily what they eat are those snails that attach to Spartina. So like the marsh grasses. So all those snails that you see are crawling up to get away from the water, that's what the Diamondback terrapin eats. So if your grasses are underwater, they have other items that they'll eat, but that makes up about 80% of their diet. So they would have to adjust. They also use the marsh grass and seagrass to hide in, to hunt in. So yeah, they rely heavily on the marsh grasses and some seagrass beds.
Right. So it sounds like if you're armoring the shoreline, it's not just problematic for the terrapins, but also
Yes.
problematic for the marsh to be able to migrate the way a marsh
Yes.
would naturally migrate. Right.
Yes. And they're pretty remarkable, but I have not seen one crawl over a seawall.
It is.
I was like, they can climb, but not that big.
It's a big problem. Let's see. It looks like we may have one more question. Jody is asking, what is the best way to protect nests from predators, especially those predators that can dig? Are there designs for protection cages that are effective?
Yeah, so we have not used any specifically, but I have seen some projects up north, especially in some have been in Jekyll Island in Georgia. They've used metal cages, so similar to sea turtle nests. So we protect them. Some use raised cages that you put on top of where the eggs are so that things can't get in, but the hatchlings can still get out.
Right.
So I've seen some metal caging. I've seen some mesh caging, like plastic caging that people stake down. So there are some ways. I've even had people get very creative, and they had one come up in their backyard, and so they protected it themselves with like some fencing and but yeah, you can get creative, but they do have some made cages that can lay on top of the nest, and the holes are big enough for the hatchlings to get out, but then a raccoon couldn't dig in.
Right. Okay. Well, great. Well, I don't know if we have any more questions. If anybody does, they can go ahead and email you, Elizabeth, and we hope that this gets people excited about these wonderful little turtles, and that they will come out and participate in the Terrapin Tally.
Yes, I hope so. Please, yeah, let me know if you have questions, and I appreciate it.
And it's so nice that the training can be over Zoom.
Yes, yeah, it is, and it's two. We have two options. There's one on Thursday of next week and one on Saturday morning. But all that information is on the website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and we will be in touch.
All right. Thank you so much,
See you on the
Virginia.
water. Well, bye-bye.